Good morning and welcome to Gift of Life for You. I'm Deborah and I'm your host today. And I also want to welcome my friend Kelsey McNamara. So I am going to let Kelsey introduce herself to you. She has a lot to say and all of it is very valuable. So I hope you will listen with an attentive ear. Kelsey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's a new experience for me. So my name's Kelsey McNamara. I am from Alfred and I own Roots Trauma Sensitive Yoga. So I teach yoga for trauma treatment. So for specifically for folks who have complex trauma or PTSD. That's been maybe treatment resistant or treatment persistent. So folks who maybe have had maybe some traumatic experiences and have used maybe other, maybe talk therapy or other modalities and maybe are still having symptoms, even though time has elapsed. And so that's where this practice can come in and be really useful for folks.
Wonderful. But I also want to add, Kelsey's running for state representative. She didn't tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us how that came about.
Yeah, so I am running for Maine State House for District 21, which is Alfred, Newfield, part of Shapley, part of Parsonsfield, and half of Limerick. So it's geographically a large space, but each representative usually represents about 4,000 people. And I've been somewhat involved in politics and just following, my local reps and local politics. And, I also see with the population that I work with, oftentimes are folks who resources or maybe, funding gets pulled away from them. So I think I kept hearing that from folks over and over, and I was feeling not represented as a constituent of my district. And I kept hearing that from other people too, that I wasn't alone in that feeling, that other people were feeling like, I don't feel represented either. And so my family got behind me and I said, I think I'm gonna run for Maine State House. And they said, run to Augusta. And that's how that kind of unfolded. And here we are now. I'm a clean campaign candidate. So I'm definitely represented by the people of our district. No money comes from outside organizations or PACs. And hopefully, just having a new experience. I've been meeting people in my community who are, in my neighborhood and outside of my local neighborhood that are in my district, which has been really exciting too, just getting to know people that I've been there for a long time. I've been in Alfred, I grew up in Alfred. So, and just to keep meeting new people is really exciting to see my, community broaden and expand as well. So, yeah.
And you mentioned that your family, so you have a husband, I presume.
Yep. So I'm married. I have my husband, and we've been married like 14 years, 14 years. And then I have a son who's 13, 7th grade, and my daughter who is 10. And they're both involved. They're all involved. They're all excited too. My kids are definitely getting involved in the civic process, which is awesome as well for them to see what does this look like to show up for your community. That's been a big piece. Like, they've come to some events with me and we've made that choice consciously saying like, it's important for them to know how to get involved too.
Right.
Because they will be voters.
They will be.
Right.
Very important. Our young people are very important in what they have to say and what they think is very valuable, and we need to listen to that.
Yeah.
So also you mentioned about the population that you serve. So can you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I do often work with a lot of veterans. So I have a large veteran population that I've worked with. I've worked in a lot of different settings over the years since I've come into this work. I started volunteering at Maine State Corrections with meditation. That's actually how all this got started. And I was a yoga teacher first, and then I started realizing that I didn't have the skills to actually be where I was. I feel like I needed more. And so I had found Dave Emerson, who helped develop this at the Trauma Center at the Justice Resource Institute in Boston. And I had read his book and I'd gone to a training and I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And so I went and did their 300-hour training for yoga for trauma treatment. And so then I started working in the women's reentry. I've worked at Sweetser with high-risk teen girls. veterans, and I also work with different populations who have different trauma histories. I do work right now primarily with women, but I'm opening up some classes, some different gender classes as well. So what I was finding is that people veterans were coming to me being like, I can't get health care that I need. That's the part that ties into the the running for the Maine State House, was that people were having their services restricted, or my kids are in the public school system and I value the public school system, and the more funding that's cut there, the more resources leave the school, and these are the people who are going to be in our community. These are the people who are going to be these are going to be our police officers, these are our nurses, these are our doctors, these are the people who are showing up, going to be showing up for us. We want them educated.
Right.
That's a value, right? And also affordable housing is a big piece too. So seeing people struggling with housing, being able to pay their bills. So a lot of different populations of people, socioeconomic populations, and that's ties into why I'm running. But I do get a lot of firsthand experience with people because of the work that I do with Roots.
So I had heard from a wonderful friend of mine about Kelsey, and this was well over a year ago. And she talked about what you were doing and that you had had really good results. So what do you mean by really good results?
So I can maybe lean into the data, and what has the NIH funded a study.
NIH?
So the National Institute of Health.
Okay.
This is the only study for yoga with trauma that's been done with the NIH. And what they found was after 10 weeks of the participants, so they had a randomized control trial, which means that folks went into a yoga class and also folks went into it was like a women's health education class as the control. And what they have found in the past is that is a control that works. They don't see that in past studies. It works really well as far as the results, right? I think if they were using other maybe physical, an exercise class or something that might have that wouldn't be the best control for this. Whereas this had, results where people, I'm trying to think of the correct word here. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So anyway, I'm just going to.
Control group.
Yeah, there's a control, thank you.
And so then.
It's early for me, to be honest.
All right.
And then our group, they would have the cohorts would be in the class for 10 weeks. And what they found at the end of the 10 weeks is that they didn't qualify for the PTSD. 52% of the people didn't qualify for the PTSD diagnosis anymore.
Now the PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yep.
Just so people know.
Yeah, no, thank you. And this work particularly is useful for folks who've had interrelational trauma. So it can be helpful for folks who maybe have had an accident. That can be very useful as well, because there can be relational things that happen in that. But this is typically very useful for folks who are in the context of 2 or more people.
So it could be for domestic violence or, attempted murder or any of the abduction, any of those types of things.
Adverse childhood experiences, yep. So, and the other thing that I think has a lot of weight in this is in the study, typically, I think it's about a 50% dropout rate in trauma studies, and only one person dropped out, and that was because she was moving. So I think that also is kind of telling too to the work that people felt like they were going and were able to show up, and so we do have, as far as the clinical results, we have, this is now an adjunctive treatment, so you could be using this in conjunction with talk therapy. And whatnot. Yep.
So it's not necessarily an item all of its own, but it's more to be added to other therapies that you might be utilizing.
Yeah, and folks do come to me, or have said, and folks have come to me and said, I've done therapy in the past, and I really do recommend that people have a talk therapist when they're coming, to be honest. But if they don't, we find ways to have support. So we talk about, when we do an intake, we say like, have you had a therapist in the past? Do you still have their number? Do you have family support? Do you have, people that you can go to if stuff comes up for you? Because, we're going to stay focused on what's happening in our bodies. And if something comes up in another way, we want to make sure that those people have support that they need. Outside of.
I would like to also mention that I also had a personal encounter with Kelsey that was offered through Old Orchard Beach Adult Ed.
Yeah.
And she did a program on one of our wintry nights, which, we were surprised anyone showed up.
Yeah.
And so that was a great experience for me. And I just was amazed at going through the process. She actually took us through the process, and I was the oldest. I have to say, I wasn't as flexible as those young girls were. But the young girls that were in our group, they worked with some trauma individuals, and
Yes.
that's why they were there, because they wanted to see what you had to offer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
has anything come of that for you?
There's definitely with different people. Like I offer workshops. I am offering one at the Old Orchard Beach Adult Ed again I think it's May 2nd, so maybe next Wednesday night. And I do have a lot of folks who are clinicians or therapists will reach out and say, I've heard about your practice, or I read on the, online about what you do, and, I'm wondering if this would be useful for some of my clientele. So I do find that there's a network of folks who are looking for more resources for their clients, and then they'll reach out, and that's oftentimes how folks will find me, is through that referral process.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I want to read you a little something. Kelly had given us these cards, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's her logo for her program, and it's called Roots. And on the back of it, and I love Roots because I think it's very important that we have a good, strong foundation. And I just would like to read this to you because it's so wonderful. I may not always feel them, but they are there. I may feel lost, but I am not. I may feel numbness, fear, pain, or anxiety, but I have roots. My roots connect me to my body, to myself. My roots help me feel present. My roots help me choose to feel I have roots. And one of the things that I remember in the class that we did was when you shared about the young people and how you would say to them when they were in the class to remember that they had choices, that even if it was only this 10 minutes. So would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give a little, this particular trauma-sensitive yoga is called TCTSY, so Trauma Center Trauma-Sensitive Yoga. And it's based in 3 theoretical underpinnings. So everything we do in a class is tied back to either trauma theory, attachment theory, or neuroscience. So there's a reason why we do everything in a class where, is very grounded in those theoretical underpinnings. And one of those pieces is, so some of the methodology is making choices. And as a yoga teacher, my experience when I first got trained, and this is not to disparage any type of yoga, it's just that this is the way I was trained originally, is that, you put your foot here, you sit here, your feet are on the floor, they're, 2 fists apart, or, it's very clear and direct. And so with this work, it's more about the individual's experience. It's not about my experience or what I think it should look like or how it should look. It's about how you might be having or how I'm having an experience with my yoga practice, right? So oftentimes we offer choices. So the choice might be we could even do something here where you're we could maybe take a minute and say, I'm going to, if you like, you could maybe just take notice of the back of your neck. So you could take notice of the back of your neck, and if you like, you could explore dropping your chin towards your collarbones. So you could drop your chin towards your collarbones, and you can drop your chin towards your collarbones as much or as little as you like. So it's your choice. You can choose how much to drop your chin. And if you like, you could stay here for a breath or two, or you're welcome to maybe lift your chin towards the ceiling. So you could choose to keep your chin dropped, or maybe exploring lifting your chin. So you could explore. You can lift as much or as little as you like, perhaps noticing any feeling or sensation in the back of your neck. Maybe you notice it somewhere else. And then in your own time, you could come back towards center. So that's kind of an example of choice and something really, we're not doing these big warrior movements in this moment, right? We can still make choices with just where we put our chin. We can make choices on how far I want to move. And so in different places that I've worked, we will have young people. When I worked at the Sweetser with the high-risk teen girls, a lot of the young girls would be like, 13, 14, 15 years old, and say, like, just tell me what to do. And it's like, well, no, you get to choose. Even if this is just a few minutes, because a lot of those kids were not getting to choose the rest of their day. They're not choosing where they live, probably not choosing to live in a residential program in the first place, right? So, like, I already know that just them walking in there, that separation often can be, from wherever their families are. I don't even need to know their history to know that there's maybe a history of trauma going on. So even if it's only that 10 minutes, they get to make choices with their bodies for that 10 minutes. And so that's what we do in our classes. Oftentimes we just explore making choices based on how we're feeling in that moment. So there's not a right or wrong way. It's maybe I'm noticing some sensation in my neck, and bringing my attention there. And what does that feel like for me? Maybe I'm not noticing anything at all. And that's okay too, right? Like leaving room for the possibility that we might not feel anything. And that's oftentimes in my experience as a yoga teacher, we would go, you were trained like, you're gonna feel it here. You're gonna feel it in the top of your legs. You're doing a form and you're like, oh, I'm gonna feel it here. I'm gonna feel in the back of my legs, and you get this direction. And then, as someone who might be a trauma survivor, they might not have that feeling there. It might be generalized and showing up somewhere else in their body. And so then we can go into this other like, okay, well now I'm not feeling that. And so there could be kind of going into attachment theory stuff, right? So then we're like, so I'm not feeling that, but Kelsey says I'm supposed to feel it in the top of my leg. What's wrong with me? Where it's like, maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe you just feel it in your shoulder, and that's where the sensation is for you. Right. And for me, it's this space that's okay in that moment, no matter what's happening.
Exactly. And I hope that you, out in the audience, took a minute to do what we were doing here, and what she talked about of just, dropping the chin. And I want you to pay attention, and if you didn't, hopefully you'll listen to it again and realize there was a different sound in her voice. There was a whole change in the energy, and it was immediate just by her presence, just by what she was having to say, just by what she was having to say to offer. Now, can you imagine just a few seconds of that, how much more that would be in just one of her classes? So I know that you have a website, which is www.rootstraumasensitiveyoga.com. Yep. Have I got that right?
You got it, yeah.
So if they go to that, what are they going to find there?
Yeah, so you will find a little bit more about, the theoretical underpinnings, like maybe you're curious about, why this work is the way it is. So there'll be some information there. There's more information about me. And there's also a calendar with classes and workshops. You could, I do offer one public class on Saturday morning, so all my classes are closed. So you'll find, and that says that right on the calendar as well. It'll say like, this is a closed group. So that means that when we start that 4, 5, or 6 week session, once that starts, we don't accept any new folks coming in for that session. So the group of people who are there are the people who are there for that time period.
And the reason for that is?
Yeah, so predictability, right? Like we want to have predictability. If we're always wondering if somebody new is going to come in, we can't really stay in the present moment if I'm wondering who's going to walk in the door. So Saturday mornings, though, I will say I do offer what I call a trauma-informed class. So it's informed by these principles, but you may have a variety of different people coming. It is a little bit different than a TCTSY Yoga for Trauma Treatment class.
So kind of, it's more informational.
Yeah, and people come, I have folks who come like weekly and like that's their yoga practice. It's just, I still use a lot of the choice making. Another piece of this practice is invitational language. So instead of me saying, put your foot here or sit with your back to the chair, I might say something like, you could choose to sit towards the front of your chair or the back of your chair. You could, you're welcome to. So everything's a choice and it's all invitational. So I still use invitational language in all of my classes. And the other thing just I want to bring into light for for yoga for trauma treatment and for the trauma-informed classes, there are no physical assists in any of my classes. So there's no wandering around the room and touching anybody. Really, it's about people having their own experience. And I just think that's a really important piece for folks to know. And I also think it's important for yoga teachers and yoga studios to be, making the people who are showing up to their classes aware. Like if you're a teacher who feels like that assists or doing physical assists is important to your practice, just letting people know before they come.
Right.
Like that's consenting, right? So we just
some people have a real problem with being touched.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of things that can kind of go on there, right? Like, I don't want to be touched, but then they're not touching me. And it's like, let's just not touch. Like, you just do you be in your body, I'll be in my body. And we can, have a shared authentic experience.
Because that would take away from the experience by they're thinking about what about this or what's wrong with me or how come or whatever, instead of actually being in and having the experience and getting that relief within their own body. And being having a healthcare background and having being a therapeutic touch practitioner, I know that so many times when you're working with someone, it's not the area that they're complaining about that's the problem. It may be something else altogether, and that becomes revealed as you go through the trauma. As you're saying, you might feel something here, and then maybe you don't feel anything there. Right. So pay attention to your body.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like, oftentimes what we know with trauma survivors is that sensation in the body can be generalized. So instead of it being like, I feel it in the top of my leg, that same sensation is generalized and then oftentimes infused with danger. And if we know that, and then we go up and touch people, and I'm saying to you, you know your body best. Everybody, yoga teachers are often like, you know your body best. You are in control of your body. But then I come up and say, but your shoulder should be here. So who's in control of the body? Right? So like for me at the end of the day, it's like if I'm going to say that you're in control of your body and that this is the time for you to make choices based on how you're feeling in this moment, then I'm not going to be touching anybody. So I think it can give confusing messages when we do that. And I think it also matters too, just to not disparage any other types of yoga, that like it's about who we're teaching to. If you're teaching and you know that you're teaching to trauma survivors, that's the thing. Like if you're teaching an alignment-based class, then it makes sense to be, your knees here and your ankles there, but that's not what I do. I am not teaching to that population right now. I'm teaching to specifically for folks with a history of PTSD or complex trauma.
Awesome. Awesome. So now you said that if they went to your website, they could see, that's okay. Let's go back to that.
Okay.
So if they went to your website, they could find out what different classes that you have, and that you're, other than the Saturday morning that's open, that you have closed classes?
Yep, so all the series of trauma-sensitive yoga classes that I offer are closed. So anything outside of the Saturday morning class, that's a drop-in class, so there will be people coming and going or making choices to come and not come the next week. But those series are closed. I do have it's about a 10-minute intake that I do with folks before. So we don't just show up to the class on a Monday night. Like we do it's about 10 to 15 minutes over the phone. And that kind of gets folks registered and set up, with me, and then they can show up, and we do all of the business stuff the first class about 10 minutes before class. So any payments, the consent forms, things like that. And then we can just show up and do our practice.
So there's a consent form.
Yep.
And then there's a fee.
Yeah.
And they have to commit to the whole series.
Yep. So I offer between 4, 5, and 6 week series. And those vary. My prices were right on my website, so you can go there under fees, it's right there. And for each series, and I'm not sure I'll be able to pull it up right in my brain this moment, but there's a sliding scale. So I don't ask for any verification around that. I just say it's in between these two prices, whatever fits for you in your lifestyle, you let me know. And that works for me. And if folks need to, say they know we're having a series come up in a month, they can also make payments prior to that. So I just ask that people have it paid in full for the first class so that we don't have to do money for the rest of it. We just can come and do our practice while we're there. Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really, really great. Is there anything else that you would like to add or that you would like to say?
I'm really grateful to be here today. I love any opportunity to talk about trauma-sensitive yoga. I feel like, in my experience, it's really changed how I move through the world, even, so even as learning about these theoretical underpinnings, how I've parented my kids, how I've moved through the grocery store, it's just changed a lot of that stuff for me. And I'm so grateful to this work and the people who have developed it and all the work that they've done. Yeah, if anybody has interest, then I'm always open to talking about. I offer workshops at studios, in clinical practices, in lots of different settings if people have interest in learning more in depth about this practice. And if they even just want to ever come and meet me, they're welcome to come to the studio and take a tour and see if it's a good fit, so that they don't have to necessarily just show up that first day.
Okay.
So I just like to make it available for folks.
So do you do more training in the evening, or do you have it during the day, or how
Yeah,
is
so
that?
oftentimes I'll do half-day workshops on the weekends. Yoga studios oftentimes will hire me to come in and offer, anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours on, how do we become more trauma-informed for the population that's already showing up here. So that's a big piece, right? Like, we know statistically folks are showing up who have a history of trauma, so how do we, make this a more inclusive, informed space for them. That's oftentimes on weekends during the day, but I am offering, at the Adult Ed. I've had really wonderful experiences over there. So like twice a year, I offer a 2-hour, so we'll do an hour class, and then we talk a little bit about the, this practice and the methodology. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So it kind of varies. And the classes also can vary from daytime to evenings as far as the series. So I do try to make space where it's available for folks who maybe work in the evenings or daytimes. And
so you're flexible,
I'm
trying to be flexible
yes.
for them as well as for yourself at
totally.
the same time.
Yep.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us again another time. That would be absolutely wonderful. So if they want to get in touch with you, they can, I know it's going to be on the screen for your website, but they also, you can do email.
Yep, you can email me at Kelsey@Roots Trauma Sensitive Yoga. You can also call or text, which is 207-651-9952. And I do have people, text me and say, hey, I, read something, an article, or I saw something there, like, can we set up a time to talk? So, I'm open to however it's, easiest for folks to reach out.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm
You're
so
very
excited.
welcome.
This was so fun.
You're very welcome. I'm glad you said hello and said
Yeah.
yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's our program for today. We want to thank you very much for tuning in. And I hope that you will come back to Gift of Life for You, because it's all about you. And you can always reach me at 318-6651 or giftoflifeforyou@yahoo.com. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for future programming, let me know. And we hope that Kelsey will come back and join us again. Maybe giving us a little bit more of a demonstration. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you can actually see it and what happens. So I thank you. So have a good day, and may God bless you. Bye-bye.